Hi everybody, we're on Module 7, but before we do Module 7, I'd like to give you more on subject analysis. In other words, this is kind of an extension of Module 6. So that's our agenda for today, to talk about subject analysis. One of the things I'm pretty sure I didn't make clear in Module 6 is the main purpose of using what's called a controlled vocabulary. There are two, actually. One is to take variant terms that all mean the same thing and try to bring them into the same space. Use the same description for a number of the same, for a number of terms that all mean the same thing but might be out there in the world. Then the second purpose of a controlled vocabulary is to show how a word is used within a particular context. We're going to use the example of pitch as an example of number 2, show how a word is used within context. And we're going to look again at these variant terms into the same space with our genetically modified foods example from Module 6. So here's our genetically modified foods LC authorities file record. You can see it's laid out in LC Mark fashion with different field labels, different mark field numbers listed here. And we know from that the 150 field indicates that genetically modified foods is a preferred term. It's an authorized heading. The 450 fields denote used for topics. What that means, if you had entered GM foods, it would say C, genetically modified foods. If you had entered genetically engineered foods, it would say C, genetically modified foods. Remember, we talked about C and C also references. The 550 field is a C also reference. Food biotechnology. We did not use the title when we entered into the authorities files. Remember, the title of the book that we were looking for was actually Food Fray, and that yielded nothing. So you have to be a little bit smart about choosing the entry terms that you might use to the authorities file. Although we'll see that a new service that I'm going to introduce you to today will help us out a bit more with that. But it still won't get us from Food Fray to genetically modified food. So here's this other way to search LC subject headings. This is the linked data service. If you type in LC linked data service, this is where you will get. We look for genetically modified foods as an LC subject heading, we already knew that it was, but notice that it tells us that GM foods and genetically engineered foods are variants. And if we had typed in GM foods, we would get this kind of same display, but we would know that we would use genetically modified foods for our authoritative subject heading. Here's the first page of the LC Link Data Service, and I have the URL here. This is not just the LC subject headings, but a number of other subject heading lists, or as they call it, controlled vocabularies, are also listed here, including those from cultural heritage organizations, from the ethnographic thesaurus, the medium of performance thesaurus, the genre forms terms thesaurus. All of those are brought together in this same space. Here's a description. The most important part of this description is this: both humans and machines can be linked to this authority data at the Library of Congress. This interconnection is done over the web via what they call dereferenceable, which I'm not sure exactly what that means, URIs. I'm going to explain URIs in a minute. But let's look at our genetically modified foods record. See the URIs here? These are actual web addresses for this authority. Again, variants are not authorized headings. They're actually listed out here. Also listed here are broader terms, which the authorities file wasn't doing very well giving us. Really big, broad term, food, and the related term, food biotechnology. And it links us to other, what they call schemes or organizational systems. And one of those is the National Library of France. So we actually get a translation of this authorized heading into a French authorized heading. This is a very powerful tool. So what's that URI? I'm just going to let you read this definition here. It's similar to a URL. It's actually a broader term, one of which is a URL, one of which is a URN, a Uniform Resource Name. It's an identifier. Here's that close match. Aliments transgeniques. There are 36 documents in the National Library of France that have this topic. Okay, so let's look at the word pitch. One of your readings this week talks about the word pitch having at least 17 different meanings. I found 3 books that use the word pitch in very different very different ways. So let's go to our linked data service and just type the word pitch. You'll see it's doing what's called a keyword search. It's looking for the word pitch in any phrase that's used in the particular database that it's searching. So it picks up sand pitch mountains. It picks up the word pitch pipe. It picks up absolute pitch. And way down at the bottom, it picks up fast pitch softball. And tells us that for fast pitch softball, you want to use the term softball. And we're going to look at that more closely in a minute. But first, I want to go for that word pitch. In the Library of Congress language, again, in context, within a context, the word pitch all by itself is not a baseball pitch. It's a chemical substance. They've reserved the use of the word pitch by itself to denote this chemical substance. How do I know it's a chemical substance? Because the broader term is bituminous materials, which is coal. Bituminous is coal. And the narrower term is sulfite pitch. So it's this black oily stuff. Okay? I also knew it from the ELSI classification number. TP happens to be chemical engineering. So we can actually create a hierarchy of terms from this broader term, narrower term listing here. We know that bituminous materials is broader, pitch is in the middle, and more narrow is sulfite pitch. But we were looking for fast pitch softball. So we know to use that softball heading. Let's take a look at it. So there's those URIs. We find out that you can subdivide geographically. So you could put softball -- North Carolina, softball -- Taiwan. We see the broader term. We see narrower terms, including the term pitching in parentheses softball. We see related terms. We see closely matching concepts from other schemes. That looks like it's from the National Library of France again. There's notes about how you can use it, so you can say a particular institution like Harvard University and then say -- softball. And there's something called a visualization. Of that term concept space that I looked at with those broader terms and narrower terms. You can see here Softball is in the center. All of the narrower terms are sort of an aqua color. The broader term is green. The related term is pink. And there's that narrower term, pitching softball, which I think is a really much stronger choice for describing that book. One of the things I threw into last week's class was this idea that you want to go for the most specific term that you can, especially when you're dealing with a very large collection. You want the books about pitching in softball to be next to each other. So you want to examine that very specific term. Now, if you have a very small collection, it could just go with the rest of the softball things. But the larger your collection is, the more specific you want to be. So you always want to examine those narrower terms to see if it matches your particular item more exactly. So I want you to think about these two before class on Wednesday, and we'll discuss them. Also about Wednesday's class, read the Moorville reading especially carefully, and you can skim the rest of them. Okay, that's all I've got for this pre-class slideshow. See you next Wednesday.